All right, guys. Hey, welcome to our Monday sales call. I'm excited to be able to have Matthew Spalding with us. He's a four-time in a row Hall of Fame producer. Like, let alone most people can't do it more than once, because I definitely didn't do it more than once. Some people do it more than once, but they don't do it back to back. Matthew's done it four times in a row. So for like simple math, that's at least 1.6 to $2 million worth of premium right there alone. He's done it in every facet, whether being in the home, doing it over the phone, doing it on, the web, whatever it is. And he's ran every lead type possible to mankind that we have here at Family First Life. So I don't know anybody else that's more qualified to train on sales at this moment than Matthew. Matthew, I appreciate you taking time out your day, man, and being able to share with the agents that we're working with right now about the telesales. And once again, congratulations on all the success. We recently had a Vegas lock-in 2 months ago, and I watched him write 12 grand in like 2 days. And I'm like, dude, he is so good. You know what I mean? So I appreciate you for hopping on with us.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate you asking. It's always an honor and a privilege to, be able to share with anybody at FFL. The spirit that this organization has always provided has been one of transparency and openness and the best training the best. And the only reason why I excelled, you know, at various intervals is because I listened to the best and I let go of what I thought I knew because I had a lot of experience, in insurance before I got here. And it was, you know, good experience, but it wasn't high producing experience. And so I had to really put aside a lot of ego and you know humble myself and say, okay, what are you doing? Because
Right.
what I'm doing is okay, but it's not stellar, right? And I'm sort of at that place again, which is interesting.
Matthew, what were you doing prior to coming to Family First Life? Like, what's your background like for those that don't know your story?
So I've been in insurance since around 2000, and I
Okay.
started out in individual health insurance.
Right.
So it was lead based, and it was like a 25% comp. And did that, my first year did okay, and then ended up segueing into group insurance and worked for another practice agency for many years, for till about 2019. And then the pandemic shut all that down, and I had no access to group
Right.
clients. I couldn't sit with employees because of the pandemic. So coincidentally, I had just gotten appointed with FFL through David Allen, who's a huge producer with annuities. And when everything shut down, I was like, okay, I got to turn this thing on now. And I started really buying leads at the beginning of 2020, and started seeing how this process works, and had a lot of learning experiences, shall I say, in my
Right.
first sort of year in the industry with FFL.
How long did it take for you to finally get to like 20,000 in issue paid premium? Did you go right off the bat? Did it take you a few months? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, that's an interesting story because for the first year, even in 2020, I was trying to manage running a sales team at the other practice organization and then doing individual life sales here because I was like, oh my God, the comp level starts at 80%. This is amazing, right? And so, because I was at 25 to 40% at the other place. So I'm like, okay, I can supplement that. So I just consistently was producing every week. And I started out, interestingly enough, doing telesales. And there wasn't a lot of people doing it at FFL. So I was training with, other YouTube videos that I found. And I was doing about 8 to 10 grand a month. And then Jack Yu reached out to me because he was David Allen's upline. And he was like, dude, you're pretty consistent. What are you doing? And I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm buying leads and I'm calling them like you guys say. Right. and and he was like, yeah, well, you could be producing at least 20,000 a month. And I was like, oh, okay, how could I do that? Right. And at that time, the whole thing was put on a mask and go see people at home. So, and that's what, because a lot of organizations had segued to telesales at that time, and their production just went off a cliff
Right.
because they didn't have the recipe right. And so it was November of 2020, and I'd probably done maybe 150,000 that year. And I thought, hey, that's pretty good. I didn't do that as an individual. I did that as an individual agent previously, And Jack's like, no, no, that's not how we do things. But I'll watch you, run some of your appointments and do them in person, and I'll come in and watch. And so I went and set a bunch of appointments, and Jack came with me, and I thought I was showing him a great presentation, and I could get some pointers from him. And at the end of the day, I hadn't sold anything, right? And so then he's like, "Well, why don't you come out and watch me?" So I went out with Jack like a few days later or the next week or whatever, and he had like 7 appointments booked, and I watched his appointments, and I was like, "Man, this is way too simple. Like this is not. He's just not even really presenting. He's just this is not the kind of presentation I know." And he closed 7,000 that day, right? So I was like, okay, I need to rethink myself and what I think I know, right? I need to set that aside. And so, and then he was like, okay, we're going to run in person. And then I started, it was interesting you talked about the mortgage protection thing because I started on mortgage protection. And I started running in person and just driving all over Southern California and Central California to get new clients and got really good at mortgage protection and in-house. So that first year that I really started becoming teachable and said, okay, you do 30 appointments every week. You set 30 appointments, you're going to get 10,000 a week in premium. And that was my experience. And basically just built it up and built it up. And then by the end of that year, my wife was in a master's degree program where she had to be on campus for 10 days. And I was like, I can't shut down my business. This is not going to work. And by that point, a lot of people were starting to do virtual. It was still sort of quiet. And I was like, okay, I'm going to buy more leads because I know the conversion is not going to be as
Right.
great. And I'm going to just hit it. And then I converted to telesales at the end of 2020.
I love it. Were you
So
still
that's,
running mortgage protection over the phone?
yep.
Okay.
So I had gotten so good at doing mortgage protection um, in person and I was sort of, a little bit apprehensive about it. And I just took my in-home and did it on the phone. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, wow, this works just fine.
Right. So
It
when did
it uh,
you
it translated
transition
well.
into the new stuff? Like, I'm assuming you're not running mortgage protection, especially the new stuff, right? Like,
Right,
new mortgage protection mailers are like $70, $80 a lead, right? Like, we're not doing that over
right,
the phone
right.
anymore,
Yeah.
obviously. When did what did you transition to next? How long did that take for you to learn? Like, I know you're running all other lead types as well.
Right, right. So with mortgage protection, I had locked out a couple of counties. So you're getting the mailers from those counties, and they are $80 a piece. So they're expensive. So I started supplementing those with the second chance mortgage leads on the CRM.
Hmm.
And then I'm very lucky that I've got a great mentor in Jack Yu because he's always been sort of the guy that's like said, okay, I'm going to try this lead type. And he would start trying the lead type and he'd be like, okay, this is working. You should try it now. So it's great to have good leadership from that perspective.
Right.
And so I started doing more veterans, final expense, basically, veterans insurance, which is a lead type because you've got life insurance is life insurance. It's
Correct.
really, you've got term, you've got IULs. That's pretty much the universe. But you've got to have a reason to sell. What am I protecting? The biggest expense I'll ever have, my mortgage. Okay, that's mortgage insurance. And I love it when you talk to people and they're like so bought in on the concept that they're like, yeah, I have life insurance, but I don't have mortgage protection. I'm like, okay, great. Well, we can get you mortgage protection too.
Right.
And so when I'm talking to veterans, they'll have insurance many times, and I will focus on an area that may help them. And many times I can uncover a need that is that can give me some really big premium. It's not all just final expense. But I, started doing my own Facebook advertising
Right.
and then buying leads on top of that. So, it's an ever evolving process, but I've never since I've been a Hall of Fame producer, I've never dropped below $1,000 a week for leads. Like you can talk about how great you're going to be and all of that stuff, but if your lead spend is not conducive to running a business at a high level, every business that's a high producing business spends more than $1,000 a week on advertising. If you run a fast food franchise that does $1 million in sales a year, you're going to be advertising at least $1,000 a week.
Right.
Sending out coupons, sending out, mailers to the neighborhoods, all of those things. And yet we get here and we think, oh, I can do it with friends and family.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, if you want to make 20,000 a year, go for it, you know, and have everybody like walk away from you when you go to family gatherings. So, so that's the it's a very simple recipe. Buy leads, call them, set an appointment or do a call to close when you get good enough, and repeat, because you'll get better at selling. If you're really bad, you might have a 25% close ratio, but you'll get better and better.
I wanted to piggyback on something you said earlier, and I want you to dive deep a little for me. So you said when
Yeah,
you transitioned over into mortgage, you had a few counties locked out, but obviously the leads, because mortgage leads, you don't get as much, but they're high intent usually,
right,
right? So you
right,
said you supplemented with second chance leads, age leads.
right.
One of the biggest, craziest notions that we have here, Matthew, is like people go, age leads suck. I actually
Yeah.
prefer them because your profitability goes through the roof. And I've
Oh yeah.
always said, just because someone got in first doesn't mean that agent was competent,
Oh yeah.
right?
Dude, last week. So anyway, finish what you were saying.
No, no, I was going to ask you, like, how much money do you think you've probably written on age data?
Okay, so this is last week, right? I have a new agent that I'm training, and he like sets a mortgage protection, and I run those appointments so they can see best practices in many cases. And so he's watching. I can do a Zoom where they can see my screen if I set it up and I'm prepared in that way, or else they'll just hear me on the phone or they'll hear me on Zoom. And this woman was 73 years old, no medication. No medication for the last 10 years. No
Wow.
surgeries for the last 10 years. She wanted 300,000 in coverage for her mortgage, but nobody else could get her anything but whole life. And I was like, "What? Nobody else could get you anything but whole life?" We literally wrote $4,600 on that case last week. So, and that was a second chance mortgage lead,
Right.
right? So it had been over 90 days. The phone rings a lot in the first 30 days when you've got an $80 lead. You try to get that person on the phone and set the appointment, and maybe they were no show, and so they never got the information. So now I'm calling 90 days later, and I get the appointment, and and I close them, and that was, $9 later, right? So it's very possible to do so, you know.
Right.
But you have to look, if you're spending $1,000 on $9 leads, you're gonna have to go to all the different states across the country and get them. And if you're brand new, that's confronting. Like
Right.
all of that is confronting. But in the beginning, it's like, do I have $200? Am I going to call those leads? Okay, I will make sure that this works, but I'm going to do the $200 again next week because I've made a commitment to myself to be consistent with my lead
Right.
spend.
Yeah. 'Cause I look at the way that, like, by the way, I'm not saying new leads suck. So always run all leads, right? But here's
Oh
what I'm
yeah,
saying.
exactly.
Jack, yourself, Josh, myself, like we all ran brand new mortgage protection leads. So for like
Yeah,
$1,000, we get 12 leads.
right.
And you think about how crazy that is.
You've got to convert, man.
You know what I mean? Like you had to sell people you probably shouldn't have closed because you knew
Right.
your lead bill was coming out next week. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I look at it like this: like if you had $1,000 worth of ad spend or lead spend, and the average, second chance lead is like 9 or 10 bucks, you get 100 of them. You're going to
right.
have better opportunities to sell on pure numbers alone. Yeah,
Right.
you'll get more
Exactly.
objections. Yeah, you're going to get some hangups too, but you're going to get some people that were missed the first go around that you're going to be able to write just as much premium. And as new agents, you need reps more than anything else.
That's true. No, that's definitely true. And um, the more at bats I have, the more chance I have to hit, a Hall of Fame homer, right?
Right.
Because, and the more chance I have to do that consistently month after month. And that's where it is. But it all comes down to basics, right? Like, what am I doing? Am I showing up for work every day? Am I working at least 40 hours a week, whatever my mind says about the quality of the leads, the action I'm taking? Because most of what stops me is what I'm thinking. Oh, that one didn't work out, blah, 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 and the noise will stop you. And so making the transition from an employee to a business owner is a real exercise in consistently ignoring that voice and just going to work. And
Right.
that's what I love about this organization is because it's like just work. Go out, break things, make messes, and keep working because you're going to break a lot of things and make messes if you're running at a fast speed.
Right.
And you can't run at a fast speed if you're not putting in the hours. And you're not going to get better at the business if you're not putting in the hours, if you're not putting in the intent, if you're not putting in the speed of dials even. Like, what am I really doing? Yeah, you worked 8 hours. How many dials did you make? Oh, I
Correct.
made 40. Okay. You didn't work. You worked an hour today. You worked 1 hour, bro. Get back on the horse and focus yourself because you are kidding yourself. It's like, so I have to remember that because there's some days where I'm just like la 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 la, and even at what people would say is a top performing level, I'm like, if I'm more assistant, I can hit a million.
Oh
If I'm
yeah.
more consistent, all I have to do is call between no shows and make sure that I make a list of all the people that were no shows for the last week and call them again this week and make sure I follow up on those people I got to the banking, but they didn't give it to me. Put them back on the calendar
Right.
because I have a ton of those that I just, oh, I got more appointments on my calendar, it's inefficiency.
Correct.
Yeah,
It's funny you say that because I'm so glad you said what you just said. You were like, yeah, I have to call the people that didn't give me banking. Just so you know, he gets it more than you. You want to know why? Because he writes it at a higher clip. So you
yeah,
might get two people that don't give you banking this week. He probably got like five or six, which is why he writes the premium he writes. But the good
right,
part is it happens to him too,
right,
because it
yeah,
happens to all of us. We just play a
hmm
numbers game. Um, you were talking about, by the way, this call is fully transparent because we do it too. We
right,
teach a lot of our agents to self-gen their own campaigns and all that because we want them to be able to have a lead that is at cost. It's not shared, right?
right.
In that level. So when did you start doing that? What do you spend on a daily, give or take? I'm not going to ask you about the ad you run per se, but like, because I think it's a good thing to see when new agents go, okay, cool. Like, I don't have to second guess this decision because other people are doing it too, and I know it
Right,
works.
right. Well, and you talk to agents that are experienced, and they're like, "Well, internet leads don't work. Facebook leads don't work. Nothing works if you don't do it enough, right? Everybody thinks I'm going to spend $300 on leads, and I better make $3,000, or I'm going to stop this." And
Right,
that's the industry. We are a bunch of people with ADHD that want to find something that works, and if it doesn't work, we're going to go on to the next shiny object. And you
right,
know what? It's like, no, consistently. I mean, luckily I had, a partner, a business partner who's like spending already and getting success. And I'm like, okay, I can segue over to that. I'm already pretty skilled at it. I can make that transition. But I do personalized Facebook leads for veterans, and I spend $900 a week.
wow,
And then I supplement that and I've started supplementing it because I want to get to 700,000 in production this year, and I've got to spend another $1,000 a week, and I'm just doing, another lead company to do
right.
that with. I'm not even amping up my own personal leads because I just figure I want to have a different,
So
mix of things.
you hit the nail on the head because a lot of people go, I'm only on Facebook, or they go, I'm only on IVR mortgage, or they're only on a lead type, and I'm like, that's a really bad idea.
Yeah,
And let me tell you why it's a bad idea. Because if Facebook changes its algorithm, you're done. You're out of business.
yeah,
Right. And so, like, I love what you said because you're like, no, 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 I have this campaign to do this. I also have this campaign to do this. And that's what I've always shared is like when I was in the field, Jack, I'm pretty sure you and Matthew can say the same. Dude, we had like 7 to 10 different lead vendors all at once because we
yeah,
just didn't want one lead vendor to hold us. And like if they decided to change rules or pricing or whatever it is, we were done. Right. And so I
right.
always say, like, it's not a bad idea to blend and mix in all kinds of stuff because you don't know preference wise which one you're going to actually like.
Right. And mortgage protection is a real sale, right? I mean, veterans for me is a real sale, but I mean, I can get to the sale in like 4 minutes. you know. And with mortgage protection, I'm generally doing financial assessment.
Hmm.
I'm very, very structured in the way that I do that. And I'm very structured. It's all memorized with veterans as well, but it's a two sentence pitch, and then it's all health, and then it's closing, right? And then the close and the way that you get the information from them is done very specifically so that I have good momentum and end up with an actual sale at the end of it.
Right.
But it's just a different animal completely.
Right.
Much simpler.
And that's where I think it's dangerous when you have some of these agencies that go, we only run this. And I'm like,
Right.
you turn a lot of people away from that
Yeah,
because like some people
exactly.
might not like that lead type and they might be phenomenal somewhere else, you
Well,
know?
and right, and look, to get into mortgage, if you're buying a crap ton of second chance leads, that's great. But if you're doing it new, like I was, you know that those are higher quality leads, but you're going to be spending 7, 8 thousand a month. And when I did my best year last year, which was 530,000, my lead spend was a little bit lower, in fact,
Wow.
than it had been with just mortgage.
Right.
So, um, but it's also skill. I mean,
Correct.
time takes time, and Rome wasn't built in a day. But there are people that are already producing such great results with this organization that you can watch their videos, you can get, and you can log into their to their Zoom and watch them in action if you want to. So it's really very good to be part of this organization for that. That's one of the biggest reasons.
I want to segue into another question. You've gone Hall of Fame 4 times now. What have
Yeah.
you learned in the process of going Hall of Fame 4 times?
Um, that my mind is my biggest enemy,
That's so good.
and that my thought life will create negative emotion, which can feed bad activity from a negative place. Now, and so my biggest thing is in the morning, get up, get your mind right, work out, pray and meditate, do those things that get you out of fighting the stream. Because if I get up and I'm like, I'm going to work and I'm going to, I'm going into battle, right? I'm going to put on my combat boots and I'm going to walk through this swamp, right? And I'm going to trudge and my feet are going to be stuck in the mud and I'm pulling it out. And, I've gone maybe half a mile that day, right? But if I get up and I'm like, wait a second, I don't live in a swamp. I'm going to get my mind right. I'm going to stop my thought life. I'm going to get my endorphins pumping with exercise. I'm going to do all of these things. Suddenly, I've put on tennis shoes and I'm outside and I go for a run. And now my business gets that kind of momentum and I'm not weighed down by, oh, I got a lead bill that's coming next week. Oh, I got this. Oh, that person said no. And you're in a negative doom spiral, right?
Right.
And I've got to start my day off with everything is possible, but I can't fake it. I got to get into a feeling place around it and know that that's the truth, right? And so that's why I do that every single morning to get my head in the right place because otherwise, man, I am my biggest enemy. I am
Right.
my biggest enemy.
I love that you said that because I'm a big fan of sports psychology, right?
Yeah.
You look at like all these amazing, talented athletes and you go, dang, a lot of them are like mental midgets, right? And you're like, how? How's that possible? And so like I was reading this thing on sports psychology where like, you have a player that's shot millions of free throws in their entire life, whether they shot it at practice, whether they shot in a high school, college, now at the pro level, right? And what happens is the distance from the free throw line to the rim is 15 feet no matter where you go. The height of the rim is always 10 feet. The size of the ball is the same. So what's the only thing that changes is the environment that you're placed in. And so what happens is because the game is tighter, because we need to hit these 2 free throws to win the game versus when you're shooting in practice, you're just shooting in practice. So like now these people tell themselves in their mind, they're like, I can't miss. But their brain just hears the word miss. And that's what they
Interesting.
do. Instead of
Right.
going, I need to make this shot. See,
Right.
because saying don't miss and make is very similar, but your subconscious mind hears the word miss. It's funny because we do the same in this business. We literally
Hmm.
go, dude, I just got ripped for like 4 no shows, 2 no sales. and you just go into this doom loop, as Andrew calls it, right?
Yeah,
And we just recycle that in our mind. And it's like, of course, the fifth one's not going to show up. Of course, the
right.
last one's not going to show up. I already had a cancellation today. And you kill yourself here.
And it's interesting that you say that because there are more days where I've gone through literally 15 appointments, 12 no-shows, one no sale, last call, 2,300 in premium, right? And I've had that multiple times. And I have to tell myself at like the 10th or 11th no-show, you work till the day's over, dude. There's still
Right.
people on your calendar. You work till 5 and you work. Dude, this is not hard work. I'm not shoveling ditches. I'm
Right.
not about to collapse because I've been going 8 hours shoveling trenches.
Right.
Nobody's throwing mortars at me. This is easy, right? This is easy. Let's be easy about it.
Right.
Let go, do the next appointment, you know?
I love it. Yeah. Andrew used to say it all the time, fourth quarter magic. The last
Yeah,
appointment of the day, an hour away from your home, the opposite direction do you go, right? And it's like
you just go.
you have to
Yeah,
go. Um,
yeah.
one of the things I wanted to ask, and I obviously can't comment on this because I didn't do it a second time, but was your fourth time going Hall of Fame easier than your first time?
Well, last year was um so working in very concentrated way, virtually, you can get more hours in. Okay. But last year I took more trips. We did a European vacation. I'd never really taken 10 days off of my business, although I did close a couple people while I was in Amsterdam, so I felt good about that. But it's cool to call people, at like 9 o'clock their time. It's like 10 o'clock your time in Europe, and still close them. That's like a really good feeling. So I'm like, wow, I could do this business anywhere.
Right.
You know? So, um, but yeah, I think I had the same intensity, but I didn't have the same number of hours.
But what I'm
And I
saying
looked
is it easier? Like, was it like in your mind, you were like, oh, yeah, this is going to be simple, regardless if I had a slow start, a bad month, a bad week, like you weren't too worried about it. Because I look at it like the 4 minute mile,
right,
right?
right,
And you look, and like a brand new agent goes, that's a lot of premium. And then you do it the first time, you're like, oh, it's not that bad. And then you do it a
right,
second time, you're like, oh, okay, it's getting a lot easier, right? And then
right.
it's like, then you go, this is like the standard now.
Well, it is the standard, and yet, um, as we expand our life, our bills expand to meet it, right? So I've got two girls in Cal now. I've got a lot of responsibilities. So I still run like when I first started, I was just trying to make the mortgage, right?
Right.
Because life expands. And so because of that, I have more confidence more often, but I still have to shake myself some days and go, dude, what are you thinking? You've got to get out of this because you are not that guy that has just started this business. And yet you also need to be that guy. You need to have a beginner's mindset.
Right.
You need to know that when you started this, you knew, hey, if I just do what that guy says to do, I'll get his results. So I'm going to spend $1,000 a week and I'll have faith that it's going to work out, but I'm going to do the activity. They said dial 250 people at least for this day so that I can run on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then I can dial on Thursday and run on Friday and Saturday. If I do that, I will get this. And, you know, being in that beginner's mindset and the faith that if that guy did it, I can do it, then that's a huge thing as well. So it's both and. It's like, yes, I've got a lot of experience. Some days it just feels easy. And yes, I'm also human. And some days it feels like, oh my gosh, I don't know why I ever started this. Even at the level that I'm at, it's just strange. But then I'd look at it and go, I never want to work for anybody. I just couldn't, nobody could hire me. Nobody could pay me what I'm worth at this point. I mean, I've had people call and recruit me, and I'm like, well, I don't know, can you pay me 400,000 a year and with a guarantee that you can't fire me? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We're unemployable. That's what I always tell
Yeah,
people. We're
I love
unemployable.
it. I
Um,
love it.
one of the things that I talk to our agents about is like eventually buying your time back. And one of the ways you can buy your time back in this business is by using dialers. to help them supplement your appointment schedule, right? So that when you wake up in the morning, you have a few appointments on there. Do you have any dialers? Do you work with any dialers, or is it all just self? You dial the whole thing, you do it all by yourself.
So I started out just self,
Okay.
and then I added people that help set appointments for me,
Okay.
and then I dial between those no-shows. And frankly, if you're using sweat equity and you're willing to put in the hours, you can set enough appointments and get good enough to call to close to make as you know to do Hall of Fame. And in fact, I spoke to a Hall of Famer who's not using any dialers right now. However, I find that I'm going to be able to expand my business with with help.
Right.
And if I've got people to handle the things that are the most time intensive, like setting appointments, eventually I'm going to work into that. If I've
Right.
got people that are going to help me handle the things that are, that can free up my time so that I can actually grow an agency, then that's really well worth it. So yes, I do, and I've got it pretty dialed in at this point.
Yeah. Because that's the other thing that I always talk about is like a dialer is assisting you in the business. It's not basically allowing you to basically let them do your work and you do nothing, right? Like I always talk about
Right.
like if I was to work 10 hours a day and there's only 24 hours in a day, like how do I have more than 24 hours in a day? Well, I can buy
Right.
time. If
Yeah.
I work 10 hours a day and I have three girls that are working 8 hours a day, we technically have 34 hours a day in our business, although there's only 24, right?
Yeah.
So I
Right.
look at like VAs and dialers and stuff like that. They can allow you to buy your time back to be able to
Right.
focus on recruiting, training agents, doing whatever it is that can bring other incomes into your business. So I love that
Right.
because, we used to back then, it was like we couldn't talk about it. Just like
Right.
telesales, we weren't allowed to talk about it. Now it's kind
Right.
of like pretty common where a lot of people go, no, no, we have some people that assist. We don't just give all our business to them and put it in their hands, but we have them help us in being able to, get a few extra appointments on the calendar to make our lives a little bit easier here and there. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah. And there's a clip that I saw John Whitmore on just recently, and he was talking to a new agent. And the guy was like, how can I get more appointments? Because I find myself setting 3 or 4 appointments and then I'm just like waiting between appointments. And this is a guy who really like his driving ambition is to retire his parents. And John just responded to him like, what are you doing with your day? This is not a part-time business. If you expect to retire your parents who live in like sub-Saharan Africa, with this industry, you got to work like what you are,
right.
the immigrant work ethic, the
Correct.
whole thing that dreams are made of in America. Show up and work your ass off every day, and you will do that. And that's easy because you're gonna have no shows. When you pick up the phone, just make sure you're constantly dialing for 8 hours. If you're constantly talking to somebody, constantly dialing, constantly leaving a message, constantly, sending out a text if they didn't make it with your credentials, constantly following up with those people, you will get results.
Right. It's funny because that was one of the things I was sharing with our agents is like, yeah, a dollar can book you 8 appointments a day. But when you get no showed, because you will, it's part of the game. When you get no
Yeah,
show, that's going to be the difference between like a basic producer and a Hall of Fame producer. Because the basic producer is going to go, I'm just going to wait for the next appointment. While the Hall of Fame producer, like you said, is they're going to pick up the phone, call to close,
right, right.
and they're going to generate the activity for that next 30 minutes or hour slot that isn't there. That's how
Right.
we get ahead. We have the
Yeah.
same time, but they're going to get ahead because they're going to use the income producing activity of dialing just because there's a no show to be able to get ahead. It was like when we were in the field, same thing. We had a 9 o'clock
Yeah.
appointment, they weren't home. Well, you can sit at McDonald's for an hour or you can go door knock.
Right. I've spent $80 on this lead. I'm gonna go door knock it,
Right.
you know?
So
Yeah.
same concept in this business. Like in the telesales world, is like, yeah, just because you have a no show doesn't mean you get to sit there and twiddle your thumbs. You can go generate business too, which will help. Matthew, what's your schedule look like now? Like, what is a schedule of someone that is a four-time Hall of Fame producer? Like, what time do you start? What time do you end? Do you take breaks in between? Like, how does that all work for you?
I usually go like, I mean, I get up early to get my head in the right place, so I don't look at that as money making time, but it certainly sets me up for that. And I've generally been going from like 8 to 6
Okay.
at this point. So, when I started though, I would be like, okay, on a dial day, it's 8 to 8, unless I got 15 appointments by 6, you know? So it's really the fact of the matter is I've gotten a little bit more streamlined. I've gotten a little bit more a little bit more efficient with how I do things. So I can generally do it between 8 and 6. But then I also work on Saturdays for 4 hours. And yesterday I put in a few hours. So it just depends. I've got a lot on my plate and I let way too many things fall through the cracks. So putting a few hours into focusing for my week, getting all the stragglers, making a list of the people I need to call who are between underwriting and they need this information and blah blah blah, and really being intentional with that, I will pay more business
Right.
and I will retain more business because of that.
Right. I love that. Um, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're going to hit some Q&As for you too. Um, is it really just leads and appointments for you at this point?
Well, no, it really is. I mean, that's the basic. If I don't have that, then the business doesn't run. But now it's um, really working on better retention because, you know, I'm not selling huge IULs, which have really good retention. So what do I do? What do I do to really solidify that? Well, okay, I've sold them. And now I'm going to put them on my calendar to call to say if they're approved 2 days later. And now I'm gonna put them on my calendar 2 days from there when their policy issues and say, hey, I emailed your policy to you. Did you get it? And then I'm going to call them 8 days later and say, did you get your policy in the mail? That's 4 touches in my on my best day. I don't do that all the time
Right.
with every single client, but it helps retention. So if I've got a follow-up like that, and then I've got a CRM that sends them out, 60-day, hey, how's everything going? 90-day. I used to think, oh, I don't want them to think about me because then they'll cancel the policy.
Right.
But now I'm like, you know what? There's so many people out there trying to get business too that I want to make sure they remember me when
Right.
somebody else calls them. And so I do all those touch points to have better retention, which has definitely been very instrumental.
When you close a deal, what does it sound like? Like, how do you, because I always say, like, we have a 8-step process of, an entire presentation. And, step 8 for me is like seal the deal. Right.
Right,
And
right.
so we always go like, hey, if somebody calls behind and says they're my manager, just know that they're not, blah, 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 blah. Like, you're going to get the policy in the mail, blah, 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 blah. What is it that you say when you close a deal to solidify the deal to let them know that, it's good to go and you're going to try to increase the persistency instead of just going, hey, congratulations, you're approved, and then hang up.
Right, right, right. So I say, hey, congratulations, we got you approved. Now, um, let me give you my phone number. Let me give you my contact information. Make sure you put that in your contacts. Put Matthew Insurance. So insurance is my last name. That way, if you forget my name, you can look me up, right?
Right.
And you can call me. And you're going to get your policy in about 7 or 10 days. But in a couple days, they usually generate them by email. I'll make sure that's emailed out to you. Now, remember that when you get that, this is your coverage so that nobody can take it away from you. Because you're going to have people calling you and they're going to be trying to get your personal information. Now, they could be insurance agents, they may not be, but you want to make sure that you're only speaking to me about insurance and that your personal information remains safe.
Right.
And that's a very good caveat to leave them with so that you don't have business rolled. And it doesn't work all the time, but I mean, I've got a pretty good retention. I've got at least 80%.
That's awesome because that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of new agents ask me. Like they just flat out go like, "Hey, what are chargebacks like, and what is this retention thing?" And I'm like,
Right.
"Okay, well, in the industry, standard is 70. We try to get it above that because below that you're getting fired, right?" So, what do you think besides your closing statements? Do you mail them anything? Like for example, I've heard some cool stuff that I'm like, that's actually pretty clever. Like I should probably implement that, right?
Right.
Should versus do is two different things. Like I've heard
Yeah.
like Digna actually mails them like a safe, like a fire safe to put their policy in. And they're like, this is so
Wow.
important. Yeah, I know, right? And she was like, everything over this premium dollar amount, she mails them a fire safe to put their policy in.
They won't forget her.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, you're not gonna get cancellations with that, right? And then like, Rob Richmond, I remember when I was talking to him heavily when he was, selling insurance face to face, like he
Yep.
he subscribed to this cookie service where after he would
Right,
sell,
right. I remember him talking about that.
yeah, like after he would sell a client, he would send the client information over to this service and they would send him like cookies like the same
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Like a thank you, right? And I'm like, that's clever. Like, so I've always just been curious to see what other people do to increase retention because it is a big deal. I wouldn't mind spending 5, $10 on cookies or, you know, 30, 40, $50 on a fire safe or whatever it is, if I can keep that policy from falling off and save me $1,000 in chargeback, right?
Right, right, right. Yeah. So I have a CRM that sends them a lot of, 30-day, hey, how's your policy? 60-day, how's your policy? Happy birthday, text messages.
Right,
And it's all automated.
right,
So that is helpful.
right,
And other than that, I'm horrible at customer service. That's all I can say. If people call me, I'm always going to be helpful. And I always answer the phone. But I've not gone that extra step, as far as that's some heavy duty stuff that those people are doing, which is very, very good at building up loyalty from your clients,
right,
right? And so, but I always call my clients back. So the people that you'll have that I've found that have not retained is somebody called me and left a message and I never returned the call. And then a couple days later, they called and canceled their policy.
right,
And especially if you have a policy issue that you have to get fixed. Oh, they want to change the draft date. Oh, they want to change the face amount, right? You don't follow up on that stuff, you let it fall through the cracks, you could say goodbye to that business
right,
because people are spending 100 to $300 a month and they want service. They deserve it,
right,
So I do provide very good service. I may not be as detailed as a safe, but I just don't have the time. I just don't
right.
have the bandwidth for that, you know.
Oh,
But I do have an automated sequence that goes out to them.
right. And that was one of the questions that I'm gonna ask, because that's where I always say like probably 2/3 to 3/4 of our calls that we receive from clients are
Right.
actually good calls, but we all
Yeah,
think they're calling to cancel, so we don't answer
it's,
them, right?
it's just
But
inherent.
usually it's something stupid like, "Hey, lost my policy. Can you send me another one? Hey, need to change the
Right.
draft date. Hey, was thinking about increasing coverage or whatever it may be." And because we ignore them completely, they think you're a scam. And
Well, yeah, no, I called a guy yesterday because I was doing some cleanup and I noticed that his wife's premium never got paid for April. And I got him on the phone and he's like, oh, yeah, I had bought like 4 policies I didn't even know about, because he was just
wow,
buying insurance. So I stopped all of them. And I'm like, well, we had tried really hard to get your wife coverage, and this was the only carrier that
right,
didn't give her graded coverage. And she got 25,000 in coverage for like $100 a month. I mean, you should keep this one in place. And he's like, yeah, call me back Monday and we'll make sure we take that block off. So if I'm not paying attention to my business, I'm like, oh, I guess they canceled. No, we call everybody that as a late thing, and eventually you get to a point where you've got people that can help you to do that. I've
right,
I've trained an administrator to be on top of that stuff as well. But I always feel like I can handle it the best. I just have to continue to train people to handle it the best as well.
right. One of our new agents is asking, are you spending $1,000 on other leads and $900 on Facebook leads a week?
Probably 1,000 every other week for the other, and $900 a week for the Facebook. But I'm getting to $1,000 on top of that every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be
Are you
2,000 a week.
blending IULs on top of what you're doing too, or is it just general life and you don't really care because you can sell anything?
They are IUL veteran leads that are being sent out, but most of the time those guys are so old that I can do an IULE with Move or an Americo IUL. But like a true IUL that really is built the right way with somebody like National Life Group or F&G. Uh, I'm not generally doing those. I mean, the person that I wrote $4,500 in premium on last week, that was a term policy, you know, but it was fully underwritten. And I tell people, do not do that. If you're new in this business, you need to write simplified issue business. You
Right.
need to get paid quickly. because you need to buy leads next week. You can't have 10 cases in underwriting where now you're desperate, so remember that. But yes, I mean, I've not delved into deeply the intricate IUL that's built in a way that's really going to fund somebody's retirement. But I have familiarity with it. I
Right.
just generally have had the lead type and the ages that an IULE is going to be the closest thing that I can get to that.
Right. I love IUL, or I should say IULE in America's instant decision IUL. I love them as CVO replacements
Yeah,
because the
yeah,
cost of insurance is cheaper, usually for the same DB, and they can surrender and take money out without waiting the full duration of the policy, and it is
exactly,
permanent.
exactly.
So great
Yeah,
angle for what we use when we're selling mortgage protection or whatever it may be. Josh
yeah.
has a question. Do you try to keep your business with a couple carriers with all the premiums that you write?
So yeah, that's generally helpful, but we're so lucky here because if somebody doesn't qualify somewhere, they're going to qualify somewhere else, right? I write a lot of AIG because of that $7,000 bonus every quarter and the 10,000 in the fourth quarter, and I hit all four of them last year, so that
Oh,
was
wow.
nice. That's an extra, 7,000 a quarter in my business, right?
Right.
That's a
It's
huge amount. That's like a whole month of lead spend.
31,000. Jeez.
Yeah. And then America, right? That's the next one that gives you a big bonus, right? So you want to be strategic from that perspective because anything over 50,000, you get a 10% bonus on it. Was it 60,000 now?
I think it's
But
50.
it's 50, you get a 10% bonus on that. Um, and then, so I am strategic about it. Um, and then, I write a lot of ethos because they're very, very flexible in underwriting. I don't write a ton of ethos, but my top are AIG, Americo, and then I do a lot of the term American Amicable because it's a cheap, uh,
Hmm.
simple term, but not the simple term, but the the easy. It's not easy term. It's term
Term
made
made
simple.
simple.
Term made simple.
Yep.
Exactly. Because it's a very inexpensive term
Right.
policy. And then I do Aetna because it's top comp, and I do Transamerica when I'm having trouble with underwriting because I've had people get approved on Transamerica with congestive heart failure
I
and
know.
and liver disease and kidney disease. So it's nice when you have those options to pivot to. But I try to be as efficient as possible with my business as far as bonuses go and high comp carriers and and really try to keep it in one family. And the reason why you want to do that as well is because if you do have chargebacks, you've already got another policy that issues that is taking care of that chargeback. So you're not even concerned about it. Right. You're like, oh, I didn't get that deposit. Oh, I got another one deposited. Oh, that one was a chargeback. Oh, okay. So it keeps the momentum going so that you're never concerned about that.
Right.
And when you're writing a lot of business, you don't have to be concerned about it because you've just got another policy issuing.
Right.
Pays the chargeback and then you get another deposit.
It's funny you say that because like this is one of the things that I forgot who I was talking to this week. I was like, chargebacks don't matter to top producers. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if I write 10 grand a week and 20% of my business falls off, because that's the number, right? All right,
Right.
instead of
Yeah.
making 10 grand, I made eight. Life don't
Right.
suck.
Right.
But like if
Exactly.
you only write 2 to 3 cases a month, chargebacks suck. Cause like
Yeah.
that's all you write.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I
You're like
mean?
worried
Right.
and
So
it can paralyze you and you can't get paralyzed. You got to keep walking forward. Any high producer in any business, whether you're a doctor seeing 70 patients a week or whether you're a lawyer that is closing a lot of business as far as trials and settlements, you're putting in the hours and this is the lowest threshold for that kind of money though. 52 hours of study for an overall out-of-pocket cost of around 400 bucks. Like you can make the money that a lawyer makes or a
yeah,
doctor makes. A new doctor or resident's going to make like 70 or 80 grand a year, you know? And then once they have worked their 70 hours a week or, 30 hours on and 12 hours off, after a year of that, they might graduate to 150. I mean, it's crazy what you can do here just through driving yourself and being of service to people and making sure that families are protected. If all you're doing it for is I'm going to make the most money I ever made. It's not going to feed you. That's not going to
Right.
drive you. That's not going to make you hungry to help the next person. But if you take an interest in them and their family and what they're doing, you will, I have people that I help every week that like, if I were money motivated, I would have walked right past them. But I asked another question. I asked another question, and they're like, "Oh man, I got this GIWL, not GIW. I got this VGLI policy from the Veterans Administration, and it goes up every 5 years. And so I now have a quota for that thing, and I just put their age in. I'm like, oh, so this is what you're paying now. Okay, it's 5 years. It'll be this much, and 5 years it'll be this much. So we can replace it with a plan that's going to at least, be stable for the next 20 years, and this is how much it'll be." And they're like, "Wow, you can do that?" Yeah. And now you write a huge premium on that. But that's only because I asked extra questions, you
Correct.
know? So,
I love it. One more question. How many hours do your dialers work a week? How many appointments do they help you set um, in that process?
so I've got at least 50 appointments on my calendar every week.
Love it.
And my dialer starts at 7 a.m. First one goes from like 7 to 10. The next one goes from like 11 to 4. The next one goes from like 4 to 7.
Okay.
And so, if I were dialing that much, I could possibly be as efficient. Um, but I think I can amp up that performance by adding new appointments through no shows that I've called in between no shows and things that I'm cleaning up the loose ends from things that didn't go through that were already on the calendar.
Right. So $3 that alternate slots and they book you about 40 to 50 appointments a week.
Right, exactly.
It's so funny
More than
because you know
50 or
why I
more,
say that?
actually.
I always say every dollar is usually good for 20 tops.
Yeah,
And when you say
yeah,
you have three to book you 50, I'm like, dude, the numbers are the numbers.
yeah.
Like the numbers are the numbers. You know what I
They
mean? I
really
love
are,
it. I
you
love it.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
Matthew, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for
Hey, thank you, Stephen.
taking
I
time
always
out your
appreciate
day
you, and
to share this with us. It was great. And this is the stuff
thank
that
you.
we talk about, like guys at Family First Life, kind of like what Matthew was talking about is there's so many people that will have the information on how to be a top producer and not share it, but not at
Right.
Family First Life. This is how we do it. We share all the information because we're actually not competing with one another. We all run different types of businesses in different areas. This is just here to help elevate the entire group as a whole. So, Matthew, thank you so much. Appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the Wednesday call, 10 a.m. Pacific this week. Have a great one. Be
Great one.
blessed, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, man.